Welcome all to this show, exciting show on Sattology, debunking mythology. And today we have a very special guest whom you have loved him. I don't know, there's something, some divine, you never met him, but all of you have loved his talks in USA. Now today we are going to talk about that how is Dharma or what is the logical steps for India while dealing with China, expansionist strategies. And you have many of you, if you are from Indian origin, you already know him and you must have heard him in many TV channels. But those who have not, this will be a refreshing introduction. So without delay, introducing you, Shri Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Welcome, Abhijit.
Har Har Mahadev.
Har Mahadev. So, in your opinion, what's going on, and is there any logical step that or dharmic step which Indian government can take to take on expansionist China?
Look, what's going on is, I'm getting sick of people trying to see reason or logic in what China does. China is a serial rule breaker. They always have been. They sign on to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and then they violate it and, proliferate like nobody's business. They sign on to the Missile Technology Control Regime and they violate that and keep exporting stuff left, right, and center to Iran, Pakistan, North Korea, what have you. Whoever wants it gets it. So, in a sense, trying to make logic of what China does is a bit like trying to make logic of a psychopath or logic of a wife beater or the logic of a pedophile. Now, I'm sure that all these people are a victim of circumstances and it can certainly be part of an academic study, but it is not part of the solution because these things are epigenetic in that sense. And with China, I really don't care what the source of the problem is. The point is, it is a problem and it needs to be dealt with. Are we dealing with it? Yes. I'm quite confident that in a short conflagration, we can hold our own. The problem that happens is if it becomes a longer one, then we face all kinds of problems because China's industrial might is so great, it becomes the northern states versus the southern states in the US Civil War, where, the South had a great deal of panache and elan and won lots of, spectacular victories initially. The problem was that the northern industrial might was so great, they just couldn't be kept down. So in that sense, that is the differential between China and India. But, if you look at it from a purely dharmic perspective, then the choice before you is very simple. Dharmically speaking, you do what your capacity to do is. If you have the capacity to beat somebody up, you beat them up. If you do not have the capacity to beat them up, you keep quiet, you endure, or you run away. Okay. The problem here right now is we neither understand Dharma nor do we understand our own capacities to even make that dharmic choice in the first place. We are so prone to self-delusion and, one of the, the genius of democracy. One genius of democracy is the ability of a democracy to rewrite itself to suit changing circumstances. In America and India, you have the constitutional amendments that keep doing this. In the second genius of a democracy, which unfortunately doesn't apply to India because we're a feudal democracy, unlike America, is that democracy acts as an early warning system, right? It can tell you what the majority of the population are thinking. And it sort of, because it's an open system where all inputs come in, you can sort of, it's not restricted by line of sight. Right, I can't see what's happening here now because the earth is round. But then if you flatten it up or to overcome it, if you go to a height, this is what an AVAX does. It's then able to see what's happening out there. That is what democracy does. Unfortunately, we're not using that. We've used delusion to cut ourselves off from reality. So I really don't know what the solution to this is, but I can tell you I've given you the three dharmic options. Run away, shut up and put up, or bash up.
One interesting thing that you said was when the enemy is strong, then you patch up with them. And the Narada says to Yudhishthir, when the enemy is weak, then you control him. So India has lost opportunities over Pakistan again and again, dharmically speaking also. And with China also, they when they had an opportunity, they went back. I don't know the actual situation on Doklam, but I have heard from in the American sources the Chinese are back at Doklam. So so this philosophy of when the enemy is weak, we need to attack and capture it has been missing from the Indian strategies from a long time. They've been passing resolutions in the Indian Parliament, but nothing has gone on the ground.
This comes about because of a false sense of morality. There is no morality in weakness. We try to pass off weakness as a virtue, and we cover it up in all this talk of non-violence and rubbish like that. Remember, India was Hindu India, and Buddhist India too was an extremely violent place, right? You had kings whose duty was the Ashwamedha Yajna, which was to go conquer neighboring kingdoms and things like that. It was the duty of the king. He had to do it. And what would happen is, but there were rules to Dharma Yuddha. Okay, you could not go around slaughtering populations. You could not go around sacking cities and things like that. And the great contrition that Ashoka faces is that after the Battle of Kalinga, he kills off all the women and children and old people in Bhuvaneshwar. Uh, and that was what he did wrong. It is not the waging of war that is wrong. It is atrocities in a war that is wrong. Because we accept, this is why we glorify the concept of a Chakravarti emperor, an emperor who rules over the largest possible tract of land, because it reduces the amount of societal violence. You combine this with the Arthashastra, the role of a king is to expand his dominion to the maximum possible extent. Why? It isn't for some, personal gain. You tell me, today you can go to Rome or Byzantium and you can see the palaces of the emperors and things like that. You go outside Rome, there's the Tivoli gardens that Hadrian built with his villa and things like that. You tell me, what is the Maurya palace left? Do you see a Maurya palace? No.
Nowhere.
You can see the Chola temples, you can see the Hoysala temples and all of that. Do you see Hoysala palaces? No. We never had this concept. The conquest was done for the greater common good. Was it violent? Yes. But it was done in order to unify, to maintain peace. And as per the Arthashastra, your only role was external, exactly what Adam Smith said. External protection from external enemies, internal peace and security, and regulatory mechanisms so that you did not have Matsya Dharma. That is, big fish eats small fish. That is the role of the state. Now we've gone away from all of that into this entirely supine sort of false morality. Have you noticed? There's the people who talk about morality the most are invariably the most sick, immoral people in their own personal lives.
That's right.
I never, the moment somebody talks about morality, I never take them seriously. Dharma is not morality. Let's be clear about that. There is Swadharma, which is your own personal faith. And then there is Raj Dharma, which is completely different. Sometimes you have to do very, very nasty things being a king. In the Arthashastra, you go to the extent where you discuss when should you kill your own son, when should you blind your own, when should a king, an individual cannot do that. If an individual does that, he's killed. But when should a king kill his own son? When should a king blind his son? When should a king exile his son and things like that? Things that even Machiavelli didn't get into, because that is what Raj Dharma is. Okay, it's a very clear set of principles which separates state from the individual, state responsibilities from the individual responsibilities, and keeps morality out of it. Morality is going to be the death of India. And unfortunately, we've gotten to the state where everything is we keep confusing morality with dharma. And your morality is swadharma. You can't confuse Swadharma with Rajdharma.
Exactly. Now, coming back to this, the recent Indo-China conflict, in your last talk, you mentioned the same thing. But just 2 days back, I saw almost a $7 billion order to the state-run agencies, $5 to $7 billion to state agencies for missiles and other equipment, which was highly published in the Indian media. Now, the last minute ordering, doesn't it show desperation and no strategic planning?
Why are we surprised about that? The story of India is the lack of the story of modern India is the story of a lack of strategic planning. And the strategic planning goes back to what I said first, that democracy does early warning. We have gotten ourselves into an echo chamber of delusion that we are no longer able to macro things because we don't have the necessary inputs. Even today, the biggest um, barrier a researcher in India faces is the lack of statistics to go on, the lack of clear facts to go on. It's always he said, she said, it's all apocryphal. There is no hard statistics on anything. How do you make planning in this kind of an environment? It can't be done.
In 99, when India won the Kargil war, and there were no Pakistani forces behind after the LOC until the entire Gilgit Baltistan. So they won the battle, but not the war. And so they had the golden chance of taking back POK, and all the countries would have agreed with India during even at that time. They lost it. Same with the Galwan Valley, they were so slow to respond. And if you analyze everything, I'm going by your talks also and other people's talks as well. The response was late, the incursion was done much earlier. If the response was done earlier, then both the Pangsaw Lake and Galwan could have been saved. What is your opinion on that,
Look,
please?
I don't think there was anything much to be saved out there, because let's be absolutely clear, they haven't violated the line of actual control as we know it. There's only one place where they've come in about 100 meters, and that's at Galwan, which, they had a sort of natural barrier advantage. The way the river flows like this becomes like a natural moat for them.
You said
So
100.
they're in about 100 meters, but that's about it. The thing is, let's applaud the government when they do something right. In this case, ever since Modi's re-election, he's been doing a massive infrastructure development project, which in many ways kind of brought this on, because we're changing the status quo. We're building infrastructure there to link everything up, to make our forces. And it's actually being done in a very smart way, much smarter than the Chinese are doing. The problem with the Chinese is they have so much money, they're going about it in a very haphazard, unsustainable way, in a sense. We're doing it in a very, very smart way. So, in this particular case, I don't think there's much to criticize the government about here. Macro, when we look at it, we have lost in terms of economic growth. How much longer can you build this infrastructure without economic growth? How much longer are you going to keep doing socialism? Ultimately, this build-up, whatever it is against China, can only be sustained on the basis of a very, very good economy. An economy run by private individuals, by private capital, by private entrepreneurship, by the genius of the people, not the genius of the government. Because as we've, look, this is a natural statistical thing. Even 1.3 billion people, 10% will be geniuses. 10% will be over average, 1% will be geniuses, which still means you're looking at 13 million geniuses. If they each manage to set up a $2 to $3 billion company, you're in very, very safe hands. You're way ahead of the rest of the bunch. Okay. If those 13 million people, 130 million people, sorry, who are above average, get good jobs going and are utilized properly, that expands your economy vastly. However, government's intelligence is based on the average of the people, not the average of the geniuses. So you have 10% of the population who are very good, 90% of the population who are dense as rock. And so your average national intelligence is going to be the same as a hard igneous volcanic rock, which unfortunately is how the government of India operates. It's as dense as a hard igneous volcanic rock.
Just before your show, a very good author had come, Anurag Saxena, and he's watching your show right now live. Just wanted to say hi to you.
Yeah, Anurag.
So, the last point in today's discussion is in the case of, or if it happens, Indo-China conflict, and Intrinsically, both are dharmic countries. It's not a adharmic versus dharmic. It's a similar mindset, but the Chinese seem to be more corrupted by the Communist Party, and India has a very good leader in a way. Who do you think has an upper hand? And this is what most of the Americans want to know.
I don't think China was ever really dharmic. And I'll tell you why. You look at it this way, when all the dharmic faiths went there, be it Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever, it never really took hold. It was sort of always an optional extra in the sense. The Chinese have never done religion. So modern China is really no different from ancient China in that I think China has historically been the most secular country I ever know. They never let morality, dharma. In India, we temper our actions by dharma. In Chinese, they've never even allowed dharma to temper their actions. Okay, I think they're one of the most adharmic civilizations and adharmic uh, uh, countries that have ever existed. In a way, it's a good thing. In a way, it's a very bad thing as well. Because you look at, say, Chinese Americans, Chinese Australians, or Chinese Germans, they are the most law-abiding, productive assets to society that you can humanly get. And yet in China, you look at it, it is always excess, excess, excess. There is not a single Chinese dynasty that hasn't perpetrated the most horrific crimes against its own people. You know, you look at every dynasty, the Tang, the Ming, the Yuan, the Qing, every one of them, they ended up killing more Chinese, more of their own people than any invaders ever did. There is something very, very wrong. It also makes China very dynamic in that sense. It makes China very ruthless at an international stage. But I think it's also what we would describe as adharma. Because you look, no Indian king, even the worst kind of tyrants, Ashoka was one of them. How many people did Ashoka kill? 100,000 in Bhubaneswar. That's nothing compared to what the average Chinese emperor used to kill, or what a Chinese commissar kills, a Communist Party emperor does. So, you know, there is a fundamental difference of worldviews. I don't think using dharmic for them is right. They are completely untempered by dharma. They might adopt the sort of trappings of dharma. They might go pray to the Buddha somewhere, but they certainly don't adopt dharma per se.
Thank you so much. I know you have to go for another discussion. And thank you for enlightening and also sharing with a lot of things. I think you definitely have a huge fan following on our channel. So thank you, Abhijit. And we'll touch base again and whenever you have time. Okay.
Jai Bhavani.
Jai Bhavani.